한국어로 혹시 질문하실 분 더 있으시면 방금 한 분, 두 분 더 있으세요? 네, 일단 생각해 두시고 15분 정도 제가 이제 준비된 질문을 하고 나머지 15분은 여러분들을 앞에서 질문을 받도록 합니다. So we're gonna do like around 20 minutes or 30 minutes maximum, but I saw some Korean speakers, Korean community members has a question, so we will make it to the next part. I have prepared a lot of questions for you. Is it first time in Korea?
This is my first time in Korea.
와, 처음으로 한국 갔다 왔습니다. And I met you in Singapore, through Hong Kong. I also met you in Tokyo. You delivered like interview with the East Global Party. So, your first time in Korea, how do you feel the difference between this? We focus on Asia, like Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan.
Yeah. So, how do I feel the difference? You mean like in just the place and so on? Well, I just got here today, so I haven't been here very long, only a few hours, and I'm still very tired because I haven't slept. But what I did on the plane, and one of the things that I love doing, is learning a lot about the history of various different places that I'm going to. And it was really cool for me to learn about all the different periods in Korean history. And so that's as far as I've gone into learning a lot about Korea. Some of the things that I've noticed when I got here is just how really how good the entire city is. So I've traveled a lot in the world. So I've been to tons of different countries, and one of the things that I'm just so excited by is just how good society functions here. Like almost every system that I tried to work perfectly. Like no problems at all. Getting on from the plane to getting to the airport to the subway, like navigating the entire place. Everything worked really well. Everyone was super polite, super nice, wonderful. And that's very rare. That's an extremely good culture to have in a society. Been to many places in the world. A lot of countries are not doing so well right now. And it's just really, really great to see just a great community. I look forward to getting to know everybody much more for the next few days. And then maybe you can ask me again after I spend some more days here.
So tomorrow we have a happy hour. We're going to represent this as a storage provider's happy hour reception. So you landed this noon. You didn't really talk to Korean yet, right? So I would like to invite you tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Great, I'll be there.
And Korean SPs, Korean community members, developers, builders, investors to the rooftop.
Awesome.
So as you can see, we have running the tower. On the rooftop, you can see the Namsan Tower. This one.
Awesome.
Yeah. So please fix your time. Yeah, great. There is some Korean blockchain media who is introducing Juan as the inventor of IPS and PowerPoint, but Korean community never met you in person. So can you tell your journey and story about how you studied at Stanford and go through the YC accelerator?
Yeah.
IPS, liquidity, PowerPoint.
Yeah, totally. I can tell my story, and hopefully this will be helpful and inspire folks here to take similar paths. So my story, I think, starts earlier than that. I was even as a kid always really interested in learning many different kinds of things. And when I first got into the internet, I was super excited about all of the different things that I could learn on the internet, all the different pages that I could go visit, and so on. And I was extremely excited when Wikipedia first started. Like that was super, super cool. I remember when Wikipedia was kind of getting off the ground, and I created a bunch of pages on Wikipedia and so on. Like I still sometimes randomly visit the ones that I started. And it was just this really wonderful thing to be able to have this worldwide resource for all of the people for free, infinitely accessible, and so on. And that was very inspiring in terms of wanting to build systems that broaden that access to many more participants, that solve some of the underlying problems that those systems have, today, and so on. So as I kind of went to, I kind of like learning about all fields. So I kind of like exploring many different kinds of things. But I got very attracted to computing and computer science because it seemed to me like a very high leverage way of building many different kinds of tools and systems. It's kind of like the new math, right? So back in the 19th, 18th century, if you wanted to kind of work in a ton of different fields, the best subject that you could learn is math, because that would give you the facility to kind of work and operate across a bunch of fields. In the late 20th and early 21st century, that is now computer science, because computer science gives you the ability to kind of tackle lots of different problems across many fields. And so that's kind of what brought me initially to that. Also, I played a lot of games, a lot of video games when I was a kid. So I always liked playing computers and so on. So I started hacking around with computers early on. And so that gave me kind of the impetus to kind of explore lots of different things in computer science. And at Stanford, kind of one of the things that I was very fortunate to have, and this is kind of broadly accessible globally, so it's not just kind of a Stanford thing, you kind of can pick it up anywhere, and it's now broadly accessible. I was very fortunate to have a lot of extremely good lecturers and good professors who were super inspiring in terms of the sets of problems to solve, and who gave me an insight into how systems got improved, how they were invented in the first place, how they were refined over decades with lots of different improvements, and how they got shipped into the world. And you can access all of these kinds of lectures online for free for everybody. That set me on a path to look at the kind of the underlying layers of the internet to figure out some of the problems that I could see and how to solve them. And so I kind of specialized in computer networking and distributed systems and so on. And along the way, I was also very inspired by peer-to-peer systems like BitTorrent and others who have been extremely successful in showing that you could harness the massive distribution scale of the internet to create a massive resource. So Skype was a good example of a group that used the peer-to-peer technology in kind of in sort of like a business context. But Skype didn't have the cryptocurrency primitives to enable that network to be kind of decentralized and permissionless the way that other peer-to-peer systems were, because cryptocurrency wasn't kind of live yet. If Skype had been invented after Bitcoin, it probably would have used cryptocurrency as opposed to kind of normal currency. So when, kind of in 2012, 2013, I started working on a bunch of systems around knowledge management and distributing information. So being able to move around large-scale data sets, like machine learning data sets, or being able to kind of version control data, or being able to kind of broadly make accessible scientific papers and the data behind scientific papers and so on. And I've been kicking around ideas for distributed file systems for a long time. And that's kind of when I sort of put together the dots that came together as IPFS. I kind of borrowed a lot of really useful components from different systems. Like there's a lot of really good ideas in things like Git or things like SFS or things like the whole generation of peer-to-peer systems from 2000 and early 2010s and so on. So that's kind of the beginning of IPFS. And because Bitcoin was already kind of taking off, I had seen a lot of cryptocurrencies before Bitcoin, but none of them had quite worked out. Then I wanted to kind of incentivize the distribution of data for IPFS using cryptocurrency. And what I found extremely impressive about Bitcoin specifically, and still what I think is the most important graph in the entire cryptocurrency space, is the Bitcoin hash rate. The Bitcoin hash rate and the scale of work and value that's being contributed and organized by a single mechanism shows you how incredibly powerful open permissionless networks are. And so that's kind of when I figured that you could build a massive scale decentralized cloud system using that same exact primitive, a block reward, but instead of doing wasteful work, instead oriented towards useful work for the network. And that's when I started trying to solve how to provide that incentive to the distribution of data on IPFS. And kind of that's the beginning of Filecoin. There's sort of like a hint to Filecoin in the first IPFS paper and so on. And around that time, then I'd always kind of I built 2 startups before. My first company was we made a location-based game. I learned a ton about building products, about shipping them to the world, about having users, about improving software over time. And so I kind of had already figured out a lot of the mechanics of how to build a company, or like the beginnings, the early stages of a company. And that, and at the time also YC put out a new request for startups that was much more technically interesting than prior times. So YC kind of leveled up its quality, because now it was kind of thinking about funding things like space and fusion and transportation and blockchain systems and so on. And so that kind of was why I ended up kind of going through YC at the time. And yeah, I think super smart folks in that whole batch. And what I took from YC, the most valuable learning is to think about large-scale networks of participants, and open and permissionless systems tend to outperform large-scale centralized ones. So in my view, if you think about like Google and Alphabet, which is like the largest scale corporation and the largest scale tech company, Alphabet tried to innovate in a bunch of different domains, and it's done okay. But YC, with a fraction of the capital in that same time, funded tons of startups in lots of different directions, and has now greatly outperformed Alphabet. So that's an example of how open and permissionless systems, where you're creating networks that of reciprocal, self-reinforcing help and so on, tend to greatly outperform centralized ones. And so I don't know if there's like good advice there for folks, but just in general, kind of follow your curiosity. Find hard problems that you really deeply care about solving, because look, building any kind of system takes a very long time, so you might as well like really care about it, otherwise you're gonna kind of give up halfway through. It's been like 10 years for me so far, so and there's still so much more to do. And then figure out opportunities and just kind of be extremely persistent. The number one determinant of success for startups or things like that is the determination of the founding team. If the founding team does not quit, then you can kind of like go and eventually find a way to solve the problem and get there. You have to be learning along the way, so you don't just want to try indefinitely. But if you're learning along the way and you're extremely persistent, then eventually you'll kind of figure out some way of solving the problem and how to make it. Lots of really great systems and startups and so on took a very long time to take off. And one of the other things that I think is really important for everyone to know, and this one of these things that's very simple and obvious, but it's hard to internalize. Anyone can innovate. It doesn't mean that everybody can, but anyone can innovate. Meaning, it doesn't matter where you're coming from or what background you had or what you learned or whatever. You can figure out some domain, some set of problems, and some solutions to it. And with an internet connection, you can learn anything you need to learn in order to solve that problem. Whether it's something like in the depths of like theoretical or applied physics, or it's something in like some front-end design for a product or something like that. At the end of the day, whatever it is, you can learn anything you need out of the internet. And so you can go and have create a very successful system and product. You're going to have to learn an enormous amount in order to do that, but you can't. You can, and you don't have to ask permission from anybody. So kind of there's a broad, open, permissionless innovation environment, and you should take advantage of it. So one of the things that I think is super exciting about this time period is that all of this information has been broadly disseminated of how to build great companies, how to build great products, how to build great systems. And there's now a lot of access to capital. So there's lots of investment around the world. And there's lots of access to great, talented, amazingly brilliant people all over the world. And so the time has never been better for creating amazing, valuable products and services and companies. And so, yeah, I think it's the world's your oyster, and so just go do it.
Great. So what is your thought behind Progress and Progress Network? Secure Finance, we are Progress Network company as an ecosystem. so much. You come to Korea this year.
Yeah, I promised you I was going to come, and here I am.
Yeah. So yeah, talk about like the Web3 ecosystem growth and the Progress Network. So you guys are
Yeah.
going to have a Progress Network Summit in November.
Yeah, that's right. So, so this is a little bit of a longer story. So, for the last 2 years, Protocol Labs has been transitioning into a network from kind of a single company into a network of companies. And the first question is why? Why a network? And then kind of like how and what, I'll kind of answer separately. So the long-term goal of PL is to drive computing breakthroughs to push humanity forward. So what does that mean? We want to be able to work across the entire research and development pipeline and work on the most important problems in computing that can be the most beneficial to humanity. And in the last 10 years, for a great fraction of that, blockchain systems are one of those categories of things. There are other key computing problems, things like AI or brain-computer interfaces and so on, that are also key computing systems that we want to be able to impact and influence in the long term. Because those innovations are going to radically transform the species, radically improve our lives, and more. And so we want to be able to kind of have that kind of scope of influence across the entire R&D pipeline. When kind of 15 years ago or so, I started getting super frustrated at the world because I could tell that there were lots of really great ideas that were being proposed throughout history and throughout academic history, so like even in the last 20, 30 years, lots of great ideas for lots of problems. And for whatever reason, the solutions to those problems were getting stuck somewhere along the way. So you can think of almost any problem, and you can find lots of papers from extremely brilliant people that have already basically solved the general problem. They've already thought it through, they've already proposed a great idea, but it hasn't actually materialized as a solved problem yet. And so why is that? So after kind of digging through the entire macroeconomic system and kind of how innovation tends to work, it sort of comes down to the fact that long-term innovation, so that means refining those early ideas and early concepts into some concrete set of technologies and systems that work at scale, that are cheap to produce, that are easy to manufacture and distribute around the world, is quite hard and quite expensive. And that if you don't kind of have a really strong plan of how you're going to get that initial idea into to get diffused into the world, then those innovations get stuck in this sort of bottleneck in the early part of the R&D pipeline. So I used to think, again, 15 years ago, that the problem was kind of funding in science. That if we just kind of allocated a lot more funding to science and increased that, then we would get a lot more trickling through. But in reality, that's not the problem. The problem is bottlenecks are getting stuck in between a little bit downstream of where science happens when people are developing the components. And when you think across all of crypto in general, all of Web3, there's a lot of different problems to solve, and even more so with many other computing domains. So if we want to kind of be able to have an influence and impact across that kind of scale of a problem, then you kind of have two approaches, two possible paths. The default path is to build a massive scale technology company, and this is sort of the path that, say, Intel followed, the path that Google followed, the path that many other companies have gone in some trajectory. And the other path is to build a network. And this is kind of why I brought up the YC example earlier. YC, instead of building a single company, YC built a network of organizations. And so when I sort of compared those two, about 3 years ago, I compared Alphabet and YC and kind of went back and looked at all of the sort of capital expenditures that they've done and kind of estimated like the broad impact. I was extremely blown away by the fact that YC has greatly outperformed Alphabet at that core R&D across a large variety of fields. And they do it by, instead of doing everything, just doing some key components, helping support a lot of innovators, and helping work across the entire environment. And so I think that was the inspiration, that kind of magnitude of difference was the inspiration for shifting PL from a single company, the single company trajectory, into instead creating a network of organizations, a network of companies. So now PL is a network. It's not a single company anymore. It's a network of organizations that are working across a large set of fields, primarily crypto and Web3. So a huge fraction of the network is Filecoin, a huge fraction of the network is IPFS. But we're starting to get some companies in these other areas. For example, there's many companies now that are doing work in public goods funding in crypto and Web3, being able to do better large-scale resource allocation. Now we're also getting a set of companies in other areas in computing, like AI and brain-computer interfaces and so on. And so it's the seeds of that are starting. Still very early days, but we'll see that develop over time. And we had our first conference last year, Lab Week 22, and we'll have a second big conference this year in November, Lab Week 23, and we're going to co-locate the conference with DevConnect. And so we will get a feel for the entire, what PL is now, which is like this broader network of organizations then.
Yeah, last year in Lisbon, this year in Istanbul.
Yep.
Welcome to PLN Summit, November.
Yep.
Great, we spent a lot of time, so we're gonna collect.
Rapid fire, let's do it, yeah.
질문 있으면 질문하세요. 여기서 받을게요.
반갑습니다. 지금까지 스토리지 제공자들은
Can you translate?
지금까지 스토리지 제공자들은 이 프로젝트에서 굉장히 많은 역할을 담당해 왔습니다. 하드웨어를 구축하고 데이터 세트를 오픈하고 실링하고 최근에는 데이터까지 찾아 나서게 됐죠. 그런 와중에 서약금 부담도 커지고 가격은 또 추가적으로 계속 하락하고 이러한 문제점에 대해서 중소형 SP들은 생존권까지 좀 위협받고 있는 그런 상황입니다. 혹시 프로토콜 해서 측에서 이러한 상황에 대해서 어떤 지원 대책이라든지 해결 방안은 마련하고 계신지?
So we're talking about the current storage providers suffering from the market condition, and like broke reward and also the price. So do you have any suggestion for storage providers and startups? And as product labs, do you have any kind of supporting program to support company go through the winter, crypto winter, and make the
So winters are hard. Winters are super, super hard. And this crypto winter is much harder than any prior crypto winter because it's happening at the same time that a macroeconomic winter is happening. So when this winter started, I went around to give a bunch of talks and talked to a lot of SPs and talked to other groups about making sure to prepare for winter. It was not clear at all to anybody how long this winter was going to be. It's working out to be about like 3 years, I think, is sort of my best estimate. I think we're kind of like mid next year is probably when I think macro will probably start recovering. Maybe by the end of next year is when maybe things will start like thawing. Now, of course, like macroeconomic guessing is extremely difficult and subject to all kinds of changes that might happen. But the broader global economy is in a massive hit, right, over the last 2 years. This has affected everyone. So everyone across the entire crypto space, all of us, we're all suffering from this thing, and we're all we all have to be in survival mode. So from that moment when the winter first started, that I went around giving this kind of talk, lots of organizations, including all of us, all of the PL network companies, and tons of SPs starting cutting costs and all kinds of measures that meant layoffs for lots of groups. Lots of groups have had to do lots of layoffs and scale back growth plans in order to weather the winter. So that's what we all have to do through this period, and we're all stuck in this situation. I think the one important thing to kind of remember is if you go back to kind of like the Bitcoin hash rate, in the summers and the winters, the hash rate operates very differently. In the summers, there's massive booms and lots of growth. In the winters, the hash rate reduces. That's because lots of groups can't make it and have to shut down operations. So the biggest advice that I have for you now is to think about, like, you really have to be in winter mode, and winter mode is just very different than summer mode. The kind of, you have to be like extremely cost conscious. You have to be very careful with unnecessary expenditures. You have to be going after revenue extremely hard, very focused towards revenue. Find other ways of bringing revenue to the system. So that means adding services for clients, leaning into kind of other adjacent things like, for example, computation or other kinds of offerings that clients might want to bring in additional revenue. And you should also be scouting. So in this moment, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the SPs that play their cards right. In this moment, they will come out of the winter in a potentially in a really great position because there's likely going to be a bunch of consolidation along the way. A number of SPs are not going to make it. This happens in any network. You can look at Bitcoin, you can look at Ethereum, you can look at all of them. In these winter moments, not everyone makes it. And in those moments, those will be consolidation moments, and those become opportunities for other parties. That's the unfortunate reality of macroeconomic booms and busts. They suck. We're in that bust period, and we have to make it out. So again, the most important thing is like be super cost conscious, weather the winter, have runways, and try to take the opportunities that you can. Be very revenue focused and try to grow the revenue in any way you can. And we're all in the same boat. Like all of us have to do this. Like we had to lay off a ton of folks as well. So. Yep.
Thank you.
예, 감사합니다. 봄이 빨리 왔으면 좋겠습니다.
We're gonna take two more, or you think?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. This gentleman.
안녕하세요. 저는 작년에 싱가포르 가서 이제 후안베네님을 보고 이번에 한국에서 이렇게 우연히 또 뵙게 돼가지고 너무 영광입니다. 일단 아주 바쁘신 와중에 한국에 찾아주셔서 감사하고요. 네, 저는 이제 파이코인을 아주 좋아하고 있는 개발자입니다. 근데 이제 저는 궁금한 거는 후안베네님이 생각하시는 앞으로 5년, 10년 뒤에 파이코인이 추구하시는 그런 제일 약간 희망적인 생각하시는 그런 그림이 있으실지, 그리고 저 개발자로서 다른 이제 아벌란체나 폴리곤 같은 이런 메인넷을 사용하는 프로젝트들 외에 개발자들이 파이코인을 선택해서 에코시스템을 늘려 나가야 하는 더 좋은 장점이라든가 그런 게 어떤 것이 있는지 궁금합니다.
Yeah, I think I got most of it, but if you want to give me your like short description. Yeah.
Excited to see you again. He saw you in Singapore last year, and he's asking what is the big roadmap for the next 5 years of Filecoin, and what is advantage built on Filecoin instead of Avalanche or Polygon or something else.
Yeah. So great to see you again, and great to be here with you. I think the roadmap for Filecoin, we're all coming up with it together. Like it's now everyone's project, right? So there's lots of development teams that are working on many different things, and so the roadmap is informed by all of those different roadmaps. The set of things that I'm very focused on are two categories of things. One is to greatly accelerate data onboarding and kind of improving the data story. So that means making data prep easier, making retrievals work, and making the usability of the storage and retrieval pipeline work. The second category is to enable computation in the network. And so that the first part of that was FEM, to bring in smart contracts and general programmability to the network. The next phase of that is compute over data networks, to be able to run large-scale compute on top of the network. And after that is broad chain scalability, to be able to scale the throughput of chains into kind of billions of transactions per second. And so that's kind of like a range of great improvements that I think are going to be super key to make the whole network work. I think like I'll kind of like make some broad guesses and estimations as to what I think will happen across times, but this is a guess. Like it sort of greatly depends on what lots of people are doing and so on. But for example, the data onboarding has scaled tremendously in the last 6 months, and it's amazing. It's really great to see so much data coming onto the network, and so many clients now starting to bring in tens of petabytes. Individual clients that bring in petabytes at a time, which is really, really exciting. We've seen now that the Falcon value proposition connects with a number of clients that don't care at all about blockchains, which is really great because it means that Falcon suddenly has a product that can cross the chasm into the mainstream, which is much more significant than tons of other blockchain systems and blockchain applications that only get stuck in the niche, only kind of producing a service for other Web3 applications. And so that's kind of extremely exciting. There's a whole range of developers building next generation FEM applications, building on the scalability primitives, building on the data pipeline things that I mentioned. And so all of that I think will start happening in 24 and 25. I think kind of like by I think 25, 26, we're probably going to get to much higher scale throughputs on the chains. Some of the stuff that I was talking about as ideas here will start getting realized, like some of these things like maybe better core reps, maybe regions, maybe those kinds of things will kind of appear by that point. And there's just a very large scale set of different applications that people are trying out. At the end of the day, like the whole mission is to upgrade the entire internet, like upgrade the core of the network, and that takes time. So think of like major application platforms, like infrastructure for computing, usually takes somewhere between 15 and 20 years to develop. So for example, the cloud. The cloud started kind of in late 90s, like 95, 97. It's kind of where the first versions of the cloud were starting to get productized. And there was a whole generation of products that didn't quite make it. And eventually kind of groups like Amazon and Google and others managed to productize the cloud in kind of the early 2000s. And then it took them like 10 years to build out the entire feature set and start onboarding tons of large-scale customers. And so think of like upgrading core infrastructure in the network as taking kind of a long time. And Falcon's a pretty young network. It's been, even though a lot of the ideas and the development happened, in the last 5-10 years, the network's been live for it's going to be 3 years only, which is kind of early still. And I think the most important thing that we can do is to grow the developer community around the Falcon ecosystem. And here, developers, and including all SPs as well, and all groups that are kind of building with the network, because that's going to help push in lots of different directions. It's going to help find the problems. It's going to help find potential solutions to those problems and implement them to refine the product and make it a much better offering for the broad customers. So at the end of the day, we have to create a network that can serve those customers really well. And if we can do that right, then it'll become a strong part of the internet. If we don't do that well, and we're not going to serve a huge fraction of the storage on the planet, then it's just going to be kind of a momentary thing, right? So we have to create a fundamental breakthrough that just makes storage on the internet dramatically better. We have the makings of that. We have the verifiability, which is something that current cloud companies don't do. We have the features like the commons aspect of being able to bring in, have data together and compute data together in a permissionless environment. We could create decentralized compute networks around this data, and we have this massive cost advantage over all the centralized providers. Those are the makings of a revolutionary product, and it's kind of up to us to get it there over the next 5-10 years. And if we can do that, then we can kind of really replace the centralized cloud.
Thank you for your kind answer.
Yep.
Next. gonna be last or 혹시 마지막인가요? 아니면 혹시 더 있나요?
I'll try to give very fast answers.
네.
No, actually we can discuss it later. Doesn't have to be. 아무도 없으면 질문해도 되는 거예요.
네,
제가 물어볼게요 그냥. 네? 제가 질문 있으신 것 같아서 나중에 얘기할게요.
Okay. So
네, 그냥 앉아서 하겠습니다. 그 후한민에서는 파이코인이 적정 가격이 얼마가 되어야 된다고 생각하세요?
Good question. So, what do you think is the reasonable price for Filecoin that providers?
I can't comment on pricings at all. I can't comment on that at all. So what I would say generally is that you should think of these the crypto networks are economies, right? So you're building a large-scale, decentralized network, decentralized market, and you're building an economy. So you're building kind of this island economy that a lot of participants are participating in. And if you think about blockchain networks, they're kind of like the scale of countries, small countries. They're not really kind of in the scale of corporations. They're like much bigger kind of animals. Like you can, they're a different sort of thing. And the sort of like native currency of each one of these systems ends up being proportional to the value that those systems are creating. Or if they're well designed, if the networks are well designed, then the currency will address the value that is being transacted on that economy. Think of like any currency in any country, and think about the value that the economy in that country produces. So think of like the companies in that area. So for example, here in Korea, you make phenomenal cars. You make all kinds of electronics. I guess we have Hyundai and LG and Samsung, right? What are the
Kia, Samsung.
Kia? Yeah, you have lots of great companies, and these create an enormous amount of value for the world in the last 30, 50 years, and that value brought an enormous amount of progress to the entire country, and that value brought the currency of the brought that value into the currency of the country. And so think of that kind of model for cryptocurrency economies, where all of the participants in that economy, working as a group, are transacting with each other internal to the economy, and are transacting with the rest of the world, exporting some product and some service and some value to the rest of the world. And if we're creating a lot of value that the rest of the world is paying for, then that'll bring a lot of value to the economy. I think another way of asking this question is, what is the value flow of currencies from other economies flowing into the network? What are those value flows? And today, we kind of got ourselves into a bad position. And that bad position is, so I guess there's a few things going. One is the broad macro winter, like that sucks. There's crypto winter on top of that, which also sucks. But there's also kind of like a Falkland winter itself too. And that comes from the fact that currently the biggest product on Filecoin is large-scale storage. And that large-scale storage, because we have to compete with centralized cloud providers, has to be priced very cheaply, which means that not a lot of money is coming into the network. So we have to create strong revenue flows for value flows coming from other economies into this economy. And so this can come in many ways. It can come through retrieval of the data. Retrieval tends to be very expensive. It can come through computation on the data. It can come through applications on the data. It could also come from paying for storage deals themselves. I think that last one is unlikely to be the strongest one, because we're in an extremely competitive environment where we have to use price as an advantage. And so the other ones, things like retrievals, things like compute, things like applications, if we can focus on creating strong revenue flows there, that can bring a ton of value into the economy. So really think about like modeling the cash flows in.
Think about the value.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We don't have any question more, but tomorrow, happy hour, please talk to Juan Bennett. Before we close this interview, Fireside said, anything else to talk to Korean community, especially I'm organizing the event as a secure finance, but without the Korean blockchain media, TDCC, I couldn't make it happen. They are helping a lot behind the scenes. So anything else would you like to say to the Korean community?
Well, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here, and I look forward to getting to meet all of you over the next couple of days. I think the most important thing to remember is that Filecoin is yours, right? So this is an open, permissionless network that we're building together, and at the end of the day, what Filecoin becomes is what you make out of it. So how you choose to develop it, how you choose to grow it, what applications you choose to build with it. So it's kind of like really up to it's really an open environment that's there for you to make it something great. And so what I would sort of be thinking about is think long term, and think the current moments are stressful for everybody, but think of weathering these winters, and think of long-term value creation, and orient towards providing a great product that people in the rest of the world want. Like, that's what we all should be kind of focused on, and be focused on growing in many different ways. I think here in Korea specifically, think of lots of use cases for customers who would want the offerings from Filecoin. Think of large-scale data storage users, and think of bringing them onto the network. Or think of groups that are going to want some of the compute-oriented things, or applications and so on. I would also maybe think about growing the developer community here. So maybe we should start throwing some hackathons here, having developer meetups, and just kind of in general growing the developer awareness and developer community in Korea, I think would be a really great thing to do. And also thank you for being part of this network. We're building this thing together, and it's really great to be here with you. And I look forward to just many years to come.
Yeah, thanks so much. Robert is supporting an orbit community, and we look forward to see you next year, FIL Seoul 2024, and maybe we can do hackathon. We can do summit or conference. I believe we have better market condition, or better more better products.
Let's hope.
Thank you so much, Juan. 감사합니다.
Thank you.